Once upon a time, there lived a young woman whose name was Teju. She was only 22 years old. However, she was convinced that she had everything in life all figured out. No matter how many times her mother warned her about the dangers of the city, Teju never listened to her. Rather, she went on to do the things that her mother had warned her about. Teju believed that she was an adult, capable of making her own decisions. Although this was true to an extent, Teju had a way of making careless decisions that got her into so much trouble. One Friday evening, whilst her mother was preparing dinner in the kitchen, Teju received a text message from her friend Ai about a big party which was happening that night. It was a very big party where the high and mighty in the state would all be in attendance, and Teju could not miss such a party. She rushed into her room and slipped into a short dress, not caring that the party was at night. Her mother had warned her severally not to go out at night, but Teju, being the stubborn girl that she was, paid no mind to her mother's warnings. She snuck out of the house, trying to avoid any form of confrontation with her mother. Her friend Ai called her repeatedly on the phone, revealing that the party was about to begin, and Teju, filled with so much tension, decided to grab a taxi by the roadside. She could not miss out on this party, knowing the caliber of people that would be in attendance. So, she got into the taxi and headed straight for the venue. A few minutes later, Teju realized that the driver was going in a different direction. She tried to get his attention, but the driver ignored her completely and began to accelerate at a ridiculous speed. Teju screamed out at the top of her voice, calling for help, but the driver increased the volume of his music. Teju watched as the blaring music drowned out her cries. Her heart pounded in her chest as she reached out for her phone to make a call, but before she could dial a number, the driver reached back and snatched the phone from her hands. "Sit still and don't make a sound," the driver said out angrily, his voice sending chills down her spine. Teju's stomach clenched in fear as she watched her life flash before her eyes. She realized in that moment that she had made the worst mistake of her life. Her mother's warnings echoed in her mind, but stubbornness had pushed her into the trouble that she now found herself. Teju looked out of the window and noticed that they were on a very lonely road. Panic surged through her veins as she pushed open the car door and jumped out of the car, hitting the ground hard as she rolled over the rough gravel, pain shooting through her entire body. The moment she stopped rolling, she forced herself up, despite the stinging pain in her knees and elbows. Her short dress was torn and blood trickled down her leg as she limped her way down the road. The driver slammed on the brakes of his car and cursed loudly. Teju did not wait to see what he would do next. She picked herself up from the ground and began to run as fast as her legs could carry her. After a few minutes, she ran into a young woman who stopped her car to give her a lift. Her name was Damilola, the daughter of a very wealthy politician who was returning home from a meeting when she caught sight of Teju walking alone on the lonely road. "Where are you going to all alone?" she asked Teju, who narrated the entire story to her. Damilola was so bitter to hear what had happened. She rushed Teju to the hospital, seeing all the bruises that she had sustained from the fall. At the hospital, Teju was treated for her injuries, and Damilola stayed by her side the entire time. Teju was so grateful to Damilola for saving her life when she had no one else to turn to. From that moment on, they became best of friends. Damilola introduced Teju to her glamorous world of wealth and influence. She took her to exclusive parties, introduced her to rich and powerful people, and showered her with expensive gifts. Teju was in awe of Damilola's lifestyle and desperately wanted to belong. However, her mother was not pleased. "I don't like that girl," her mother said one evening as Teju got ready for another outing. "There's something about her that doesn't sit right with me. Stay away from her," she said to Teju, who scoffed. "Mama, you always find a way to hate on my friends." Just because you've never been around real power in your life does not mean that you should sabotage my own chances. Damilola is the only bridge that we have to actual wealth, and instead of your usual bitterness, you should be thanking her for this privilege, Teju said to her mother, whose heart shattered at her daughter's words, but she swallowed her pain in silence. All she could do was lift her eyes to the heavens and pray. Pray that Teju would not have to bleed before learning the truth. Days passed, and Damilola invited Teju to her house. It was a grand mansion, bigger than anything that Teju had ever seen in her life. Wow! Teju gasped, taking in the marble floors, the gold-trimmed furniture, and sparkling chandeliers. "Your house is like a palace," she said to Damilola, who laughed and replied her, revealing that this was just one of their mansions. Teju could not believe her ears. She wanted this kind of life, a life filled with luxury and power, where she could afford whatever she so wanted. They arrived at Damilola's room, and Teju could not hold back her shock. Damilola had hundreds of wigs lined up in her bedroom, expensive wigs that Teju could only dream of owning. Damilola reached out for one of the wigs and presented it to Teju, whose eyes widened in disbelief as she held the wig in her hands. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen, soft, silky and luxurious. Damilola convinced her to try it on, and Teju slipped the wig onto her head excitedly. She looked at herself in the mirror and could not believe how beautiful she looked. Teju in that moment could not help but imagine how beautiful life would be in Damilola's shoes. She turned back to look at Damilola, who informed her that the wig was now hers. "It's all yours, Teju," she said to Teju, who froze in shock, realizing how expensive the wig was. Teju had never received such an expensive gift before. She wanted to refuse it, but Damilola insisted that she keeps it. Hours later, Teju arrived home with the wig in her hand. Her mother, on sighting it, asked where she got the wig from, and Teju revealed that it was a gift from Damilola. Teju's mother was so furious to hear this. Her best friend Kemi tried to calm her down, but Teju's mother yelled angrily at Teju, demanding that the wig be returned. But Teju ignored her mother and walked into her room, shutting the door behind her. She could not understand why her mother hated Damilola so much, despite all the wonderful things that Damilola had done for her. That night, Teju went to bed with a smile on her face. She had never felt so important before. She carefully hung the wig in her room as she drifted off to sleep, thinking about the mansions and the life of luxury that she so desperately yearned. However, somewhere around 2 in the morning, Teju was awoken by a terrifying itch on her scalp. At first, she tried to ignore it, scratching lazily as she reached for her phone, but the itch became unbearable, like tiny needles, pricking her all over her head. She groaned aloud and sat up fully, scratching aggressively as she wondered what could be the cause of such a terrifying itch. Then she felt it, something squishy between her fingernails. Teju brought her hand down and looked. Lo and behold, maggots were stuck between her fingers, tiny white maggots, wriggling in and out of her scalp. Teju screamed out in terror. Her mother, who was already fast asleep, jumped out of bed and rushed to her room. "What is it?" she asked Teju, whose hands shook in terror as she pointed at her hair. Her mother gasped as she saw the maggots crawling through her daughter's scalp. "Blood of Jesus!" she cried as she grabbed the scarf and tried to wipe the maggots away from her daughter's head. Teju could feel her world collapse before her eyes. The more they tried to get rid of the maggots, the more maggots oozed out of her scalp. Her mother screamed out for help, and soon neighbors gathered, watching in horror as Teju pleaded for someone to save her. She was rushed to several hospitals, but there was no medical explanation for her condition. Nothing they did was able to kill or stop the maggots from growing. Her once beautiful face became swollen, and her eyes were bloodshot from sleepless nights. Teju's mother, overwhelmed with grief and desperation, finally decided to take a bold step. "We are going to church," she said firmly to Teju, whose scalp was now covered with maggots. God will heal you, my daughter. We need to go to him for healing. Teju snapped her head up, her face filled with intense anger. No, Mama, no church. All they want is offering and tithes. Prayers for healing that come with envelopes and seed sowing. If money is what they want, let them heal themselves first. Her mother gasped at her words, but Teju was not willing to listen. She had lost hope in churches. To her, none of them could help her. She wanted results, not long services and empty promises. Later that day, her mother's best friend Kemi came visiting. After seeing the state Teju was in, she suggested that they go see a spiritualist who was known for her great powers. I've seen her do great things that doctors and pastors couldn't, Auntie Kemi said to Teju's mother, who was blatantly against the idea. We are not interested in visiting a spiritualist though, Teju's mother said to her best friend Kemi, when Teju interrupted her saying that she would go. Anything is better than this pain, Mama. If you won't take me, I'll go by myself, she said to her mother, who tried to convince her that such places often brought more harm than good. Teju, desperate for instant healing, insisted on going. She followed her mother's friend Auntie Kemi, who took her to Iya Aba, a powerful spiritualist who lived in the outskirts of town. Her hut was surrounded by herbs, skulls of animals, and strange drawings that sent shivers down Teju's spine. Yet, there was something strange about her presence. Iya Aba studied Teju in silence. She then told her to sit before a large bowl of water. You have been touched by unclean hands, Iya Aba said, revealing that the wig carried more than just hair. It carried evil spirits, sent to suck out your destiny to enrich another. Iya Aba revealed to Teju that she was used for money rituals. Damilola was no ordinary friend. Her father used her to get young girls who they would use for rituals. Iya Aba, after revealing this, handed Teju a calabash filled with crushed herbs and water, instructing her to wash her head in the water. When you are done, I will keep the water here in my sanctuary for 3 days. During that time, you must not speak a single word, not to me, not to your mother, not even in prayer. Teju looked at her confused. You mean I can't speak to anyone for 3 days? She asked Iya Aba, who revealed to her that silence was the sacrifice. If your lips move, your healing will vanish, she said to Teju, who nodded in fear. She washed her hair in the bowl, wincing at the sting of the herbs on her wounded scalp. After the ritual, Iya Aba whispered a blessing over the bowl and took it inside. Teju, still trembling in fear, walked out of the strange house with her Auntie Kemi. As they approached the car, a little girl, no older than 8 years old, stood by the footpath leading outside of the spiritualist's house. She approached Teju, who was now lost in her own thoughts. Sister, the little girl said in a gentle voice, please, can I talk to you? Teju froze. Her heart pounded. Her lips parted slightly to respond, but she quickly remembered the stern warning Iya Aba had given to her. Teju clenched her mouth shut and took a step back. The girl reached out again, pleading for just a word, and Teju took another step backwards, her eyes wide in fear. She looked at Auntie Kemi, who immediately stepped forward, shielding Teju with her arm. Go away, you demon, Auntie Kemi said to the little girl, who hugged Teju tightly and walked away. When Teju arrived home, she didn't speak to her mother or anyone else. She locked herself up in her room, crying bitterly as she felt the worms crawling in her hair. She did not speak, not even when her mother knocked on her door to pray for her. The silence felt like punishment and prison, but she endured it because she wanted to be free from the pain that had stolen her peace. That night, as Teju lay down to sleep, she had a dream that terrified her greatly. Teju saw a strange woman chasing after her with a knife. She woke up terrified, drenched in her own sweat. She sat on her bed panting heavily as her hands trembled. The image of the woman with the knife refused to leave her mind. Teju could feel her heart beat faster. She stood up from her bed and reached for her scarf to cover her scalp. As she reached into the pocket of her dress, Teju felt a soft paper. With shaking hands, she pulled it out. It was a small wrinkled note, neatly folded in her pocket. Teju stared at the note, her breath catching in her throat. She didn't remember placing anything in her pocket, so she opened it slowly and began to read. Damilola is innocent. The note read, "She never wanted to hurt you. Auntie Kemi, your mother's friend, is the one behind it all. She paid the taxi man to kidnap you on that fateful night. She also made the maggots come out of your head to make you believe that it was the wig. She even went further to pay a visit to Damilola to inform her that you were cursed so that she would stay away from you. Auntie Kemi is not a friend. She wants to ruin your life completely because of her jealousy. Please be careful." Teju could feel goosebumps on her body. She wondered who could have left the note in her pocket, when suddenly her mind raced back to the little girl who tried to speak to her earlier. It all began to make sense. The way Auntie Kemi insisted on taking her to the spiritualist, the way she shouted at the little girl, and now the dream. Teju could not believe it. She had blamed Damilola, believing that she was the one behind all that was happening to her. She sat on her bed, clutching the note in her hand as she sobbed uncontrollably. She had pushed away the one person who had truly cared for her and kept her enemy close. When morning came, Teju broke her silence. She told her mother about the note, and her mother broke down in tears, regretting all her actions towards Damilola. A while ago, Teju's mother had a dream where she saw an evil being forcing a wig on her daughter's head. So, when Damilola gifted her daughter the wig, she concluded that Damilola was evil, not knowing that it was her friend Kemi who, through diabolical means, cursed her daughter to make them suffer. Teju in that moment pleaded with her mother to take her to a church, and without wasting any time, her mother agreed and took her to a church which was a short distance from their home. The pastor, after listening to their story, stretched out his hand and began to pray for Teju, who felt an instant relief from the worms that had tormented her for weeks. However, far away from the church, in Auntie Kemi's house, something terrible happened. Kemi, who had been peacefully sipping her tea in her living room, suddenly dropped the cup and screamed out in pain. She stumbled to the mirror, and to her horror, she saw the maggots pouring out of her scalp, just like they had once done to Teju. "No! No!" she screamed, slapping her head wildly. Her neighbors rushed in, only to find her rolling on the floor, scratching, screaming and begging for help as the worms burrowed deeper into her skin. It was clear that the evil had backfired. Teju received her healing, whilst Auntie Kemi suffered the consequences of her evil. From that day on, Teju learned to listen to her mother, who had always tried to protect her, even when she didn't understand why. She tried to reach out to Damilola, who she was told had left the country for her education. Teju spent years healing. She became more prayerful, more discerning, and more grounded. She no longer sought validation in luxury or attention. She now knew the dangers of jumping into hasty conclusions. Auntie Kemi was never seen again. Some said she was taken to a mental institution. Others believe her condition could not be cured, as the spiritual worms never stopped eating into her mind. It was as though everything she had planned for Teju had returned to her sevenfold. As for Teju, her story became a warning to other girls in the community to be careful of the people they trust, and that sometimes the devil wears a friendly face. The lesson to be learned from these stories is that we must listen to the wise counsel of those who genuinely care for us, especially our parents, as their warnings often come from a place of love and protection. Desperation should never lead us to seek help from ungodly or harmful places, and discernment is essential in recognizing true intentions. Above all, humility, prayer and obedience can lead to healing, whilst pride and stubbornness can open doors to destruction. I hope you enjoyed the story.